America's center of power changed, and with it, the dynamics of the political landscape. The consequences will reverberate locally, in Florida, on Capitol Hill, and on the global stage. Voters demanded change on the issues that mattered most: the economy, immigration, and social issues. Now, News 4 Jax goes beyond the headlines with political analysts who provide unique context and perspective. Experts focused on the issues making headlines. This is Politics and Power.
And the theme this week on Politics and Power, upsetting. As in, the president is upsetting Americans economically. He's upsetting the global economy. And Florida's governor is upsetting top-tier members of the GOP. Let's start with this. The president sent shockwaves through Washington by firing the Labor Department statistician after weaker than normal job numbers appeared, claiming that she rigged the numbers. The moves people are calling Orwellian and authoritarian. And when it comes to tariffs, the president says America is winning, but the reality so far proves to be very different. Just ask the average American. And there is intense uncertainty in the U.S. and around the world as a result. It's still unclear how it's all going to end. And if Florida Governor Ron DeSantis wants to run for president in 2028, he's going to have to learn to play nice in the GOP sandbox. Welcome to Politics and Power. I'm Bruce Hamilton. Joining me, my friend Matt Corrigan, a political analyst from Jacksonville University. Welcome, Matt. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Bruce.
So let's start with this. President Trump fired the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, Erica McEntefar, after weaker than expected jobs figures. Trump said in a social media post, quote, "We need accurate jobs numbers. She'll be replaced with somebody much more competent and qualified. Important numbers like this," he said, "must be fair and accurate. They can't be manipulated for political purposes." The president maintained she rigged the numbers. Matt, any way to rig the numbers like that, or is just firing the messenger here because he didn't like the message?
Yeah, definitely firing the messenger. It's like firing the weatherman because it's hot outside.
You don't like the weather?
Yeah, you don't like the weather. It's a bad situation on a couple of fronts. One, you want to get accurate information, obviously, when you're trying to make economic decisions. As a president and as business leaders, they rely upon those numbers. So you want to make sure they're accurate and political, basically free from political pressure. And so that's upsetting. And the other part is it's putting pressure again on public administrators. In other words, this administration has a history of, if you have bad news for the president or don't like what he's saying or don't like the way his policies are going, and you tell him that, then you're probably going to get fired.
And people sit back and they say, oh, well, you know what? They refined the numbers throughout the course of, the past couple of months. But that's just the reality. They do refine those labor statistics as, things come in. And that's the way it's been done for years. So Mr. Trump said he wants to put somebody in there he can trust. So when the next set of labor statistics are made public, will there be any reason to question their integrity? And we're going to talk about a move he made in just a second, but I have a feeling there may be.
Yeah, I think what I've heard is that one of the authors of Project 2025, this kind of broad portfolio to insert executive power using the unitary presidential theory, is up for the position. And he would clearly want to please President Trump. And that's I think will be his number one objective, and he has a history of basically criticizing the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So, yeah, I think it's going to be much tougher to trust the numbers, and that's really a tragedy.
Yeah, and we'll see what it does to the stock market. So the president does this, still fuming over the jobs report. He finds some numbers. He likes, and they're based on unpublished data from the Census Bureau, which means they're difficult to verify independently. And now he nominates an economist there to be the new head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the Heritage Foundation. Is he naive enough to think that people are going to buy it?
I think people have really bought into his presidency in terms of his supporters. Basically, to me, Donald Trump is a middle finger directed at the political establishment. And so anything that he does that's out of the ordinary or out of tradition or out of norms or even extra legal sometimes, I mean, having some questions about the legality of some of these moves, his supporters like. And so I think they won't miss anything by doing this.
You mentioned Project 2025, and it's interesting because he came into this saying, well, I don't know a lot about Project 2025. I don't know what they're all about. But if you look at his agenda, it's all about Project 2025. I mean, I'm going to date myself here, it's a Xerox copy.
Sure. It's a blueprint. I mean, it's been the blueprint for the administration. And again, it goes back to the unitary theory of presidential power, which is to me, an extreme theory that says, the president should be the number one person in our form of government in terms of looking in comparison with the two other institutions, the judiciary and the legislature. And I just don't think there's any historical backing for that. If you look at the Constitutional Convention, they were really concerned about having an executive that would become king-like. And even those who had advocated for executive power really said, again, there's going to be limits, and there has to be limits if we're going to make this democracy work.
So what are the limits? And in fact, you and I were talking back in the newsroom, and I said, are we to the point of a constitutional crisis? And you said it doesn't reach that point until...
He defies the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court says that the administration has to do something and they blatantly disregard it, then we've got a constitutional crisis.
But the Supreme Court so far has pretty much sided with him. You think tariffs might be the big issue here?
I think potentially tariffs might go against the president in terms of the Supreme Court. But there have been such a long line of cases, really going back to the immunity case, that have given the president more leeway. And the big check that has to come up if Americans really don't like this form of government and the way this government is going is the midterm elections. If Republicans maintain the House and the Senate in the midterm elections, Katie barred the door what's going to happen the final 2 years under the Trump administration.
It's interesting you bring up the whole case of immunity. I'm getting off topic here because he said, you know what, I want to take Barack Obama to court on the whole election issue. And you know what he brought up? Barack Obama should have presidential immunity.
He should.
Donald Trump, but he doesn't seem to think so.
Yeah, only for him.
Yeah.
So I think, and for his supporters, again, he's brought action, he's brought energy to the executive. For those who question his energy or even his intelligence, he's a very energetic and intelligent 79-year-old person. I mean, I'm impressed by his energy. But that doesn't mean he gets to do anything he wants to do. And the checks in our system are not functioning particularly well right now.
All right, before I get back on track to what we were talking about, is this all an attempt to divert attention from the Epstein files and whatever might be in them?
Yeah, I think the president's a master at manipulating media coverage and in terms of what people are paying attention to. He comes from a television background. He knows what camera to look at and all that. And so he's very, I think, media savvy. And so, yes, I think part of what's going on here is trying to detract not only from Epstein. There's lots of economic problems. There are problems in his foreign policy right now. After the Iran success, which I would call a success, both in Ukraine and Gaza are huge messes right now. So I think he is trying to get our attention to look elsewhere.
And is he aware that his ratings among the American people are down largely because of the economic problems? Because if you talk to the American public, they say, hey, look, we're hurting.
Yeah.
We can't afford to go to the grocery store. We can't afford, to look toward the future economically. Is he aware of that?
I think he is, and but he doesn't acknowledge it. He doesn't like numbers that don't favor him. This goes back to the 2020 election. He lost the election. He never really
he doesn't acknowledge
it. And this goes to the labor numbers. I don't like the numbers. It can't be what I'm doing. It's got to be
what Joe Biden did.
Yeah, it's got to be the numbers. The numbers are the problem, not me. So he's got a long history of this.
It's all make-up numbers. All right. So is what's going on back on track here? 5-alarm fire, and is the president causing intentional harm to the integrity of the U.S. economic data and the entire statistical system?
I don't think it's a 5-alarm fire, but I do think there's cause for concern, because you want to make sure that you want government employees, and really we've set a system up to have merit-based employees for our federal government. We had a president assassinated in the late 1800s because of an employee, a potential employee who didn't get a job that the president was supposed to give him. And so since that time, I think we've tried to map out a more merit-based system among our federal employees. And that idea is that you're going to work, you're going to be an expert in your field, and that's going to be free from political pressure. President Trump is wiping away that whole concept. And while the Bureau of Labor Statistics director is a presidential appointee, so he had the ability to fire that person, there's tens of thousands of federal employees who've kind of suffered under this idea that if you're not politically loyal, you can't work for the federal government.
All right, I wasn't going to go there, but you've got anybody, that would hold anybody accountable who's out right now. Like, take the DOJ.
Right.
There's nobody in the DOJ now who would hold anybody in the administration accountable should anything happen. That's frightening. Right.
And he also removed inspector generals, in many of these departments, which are the position that looks out after, these issues. And so, again, it's a full court press for executive power and presidential power. Is
that another way of saying an authoritarian situation?
I don't think we're there yet, but that's a concern. I mean,
we're down the path. We're on the road.
Yeah, you can look at it, and there's been way too much power given to the presidency in the last 6 months, both by the legislature and the court system. And a lot of the federal district judges have really slapped back a little bit on this idea of too much presidential power. But on the appellate level and the Supreme Court level, generally President Trump has won many of those cases, and we'll see if that continues. I think there'll be a couple of cases that he will lose coming up, but he has a pretty good record so far. And so, our system was designed for Congress to act as a check, and Congress has just abandoned it.
And the people in Congress are just worried about getting reelected.
Yeah, they've just abandoned that idea. President Trump has a remarkable hold on his supporters, and the people in Congress know that, and they know the way. I don't think we're going to get into districting today, but the way districts are drawn in these congressional districts in the House, it's usually a very Republican district or a very Democratic district. So they have to answer to the base of the Republican Party who adore President Trump.
Well, we can touch on that briefly, even though that hadn't been our intention, because redistricting, what it really is all about, is it 2 more years of Donald Trump and his MAGA ways, or is it, letting the Democrats basically, put those checks and balances on Donald Trump in the midterm elections? I mean, that's really what the whole redistricting argument is all about.
Yeah, and the way you draw districts, and for the public who get very confused about this, it's, the idea of American democracy is that the voters pick representatives. Well, districting basically flips that on its head. The representatives are picking who's going to vote for them. And so, and with computer technology, you can draw these districts in such ways that, you can make a district almost guaranteed to produce a Republican representative or a Democratic representative. And so what President Trump is saying is, in a couple of these states, especially Texas, we can get more Republicans out of there.
And that's what Governor Newsom is trying to do in California, saying we're going to get more Democrats.
Yeah, and so the Democrats are answering, well, we can do the same thing. And so it's a mess. The Constitution says every 10 years we conduct a census. And so those numbers are supposed to be used by the state legislatures to draw these districts. And really implied in that is it's really supposed to be done every 10 years. But there's no restrictions on states doing it in between those 10 years. And but it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't serve the voter very well. I mean, you're going to change who their representative is, and in the mid-decade, and it's a grab for power. And again, when you talk about checks on the president, the biggest check would be the midterm elections, and if Democrats can win one of the two houses. If the Democrats don't win one of the two houses, I mean, he's got nothing really to check him.
To hold him back. All right. Some people say if you look at moves over the past half a year, attempts to rewrite history, the firing we were talking about, trying to compromise the independence of the Fed, things have taken an Orwellian and even authoritarian turn. There are some legitimate concerns there.
Sure, and yeah, we've talked about them. You know, I think President using the military, the National Guard in some American cities, I mean, that walks a very fine line. And he really has limited power to do that. D.C. is a separate case because it's a federal territory. But, you know, something like that, if that continues, if he says, I don't like what's going on in Orlando, I'm bringing in federal troops. I mean, that's not what we do here in the United States of America. You only do that in very extreme circumstances. The Insurrection Act, during the Civil Rights period when localities were just ignoring the Supreme Court rulings, brought troops in, but it's only in very limited circumstances. And so that's something to watch. And what is, if you're a supporter of President Trump, what's impressive about his administration is the full court press everywhere for executive power. The Kennedy Center. I mean, I think the President of the United States...
You mean the Kennedy Center, the Donald Trump Center, yeah.
I mean, I think
the Opera House, the Melania... Yeah.
You know, the President's got more important things right now than to be the chairman of the Kennedy Center board.
That's ego.
You know, but he's just everywhere. And they are pressing everywhere on every button in the federal government. And, in history, and I think his supporters will say, listen, look in history. We've had plenty of presidents try to expand executive power, and they're absolutely right. It's just human nature. If you're an executive, you want more power. But he's doing it on all fronts. You know, people like Franklin Roosevelt did it during the war. Abraham Lincoln did it during the war. So it's a much different circumstance than what we're dealing with now.
Yeah, and let me get back to, deploying the troops in D.C. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the courts right now with Los Angeles, which, the courts are looking at. That may decide what happens in the future. And don't get me started on paving over the Rose Garden.
Okay.
Yeah, that's... let's talk about the tariffs. The United States is starting to feel its effects. Inflation is picking up. Consumer inflation is rising, and a separate inflation gauge employed by the Fed shows prices have increased over the past month. Labor market shows signs of cooling. All of this is in direct contrast to what Donald Trump says. And the American public is starting to take notice. More than 2,000 Americans were asked by the Century Foundation how they were managing the high cost of living. 63% said Donald Trump had a negative impact on grocery prices. 61% said he had a negative impact on the cost of living. Nearly half, 49%, said the Trump administration had a negative impact on their finances. 8 out of 10 Americans, including 70% of Republicans, did you hear me there? 70% of Republicans fear that Donald Trump's tariffs will increase the price of everyday goods. Is there an upside historically? Has there ever been an upside to tariffs?
In targeted circumstances, when some of the American industries were getting off the ground, going back to Great Britain, when Great Britain was a major power, they tried to flood the United States with their products so they wouldn't get pushed out. So tariffs were used to do things like that. But in targeted industries, I'm not an economist, but they've been used to some success. But this blanket across the board, goes back to the Smoot-Hawley disaster in 1930, from the Ferris Bueller movie that everybody remembers. But tariffs, really brought us into depression or exacerbated a depression. And so at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay. So if you're increasing the cost of goods coming into the country, who's going to pay? Is it going to be the companies that are selling the goods, or is it going to be the consumer? Well, the consumer is probably going to pay some. So So we will see, where this leads. Now, what a success of the president can talk about, I think, is that the tariffs are bringing in a lot of money to the federal treasury. Some estimates $30 billion a month. That's real money, even for the federal government. So where's all that money going to go? What's going to be the use for that money? Are we going to pay down the debt? Or are we going to use it for something else? That's an important question to ask.
So we haven't even dealt with the midterm elections, but there's a focus already by some on the 2028 presidential election. Among them is Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis. But in the presidential poker match, he's playing his cards all wrong, especially with other high-powered Republicans, and that includes those in Donald Trump's orbit. We explore that when Politics and Power continues. If Florida's governor wants to run for the White House, he is going to have to learn to play nice with fellow Republicans. These days, Ron DeSantis seems to be picking fights with people in the president's inner circle. And the bottom line is, he's not playing nice in the sandbox. It does appear that Florida's chief executive and the nation's chief executive are on pretty good terms, at least on the surface, these days. Two appeared together at the opening of Alligator Alcatraz in July, and they couldn't say enough nice things about each other. What a setting to share the love, huh? The contentious new migrant detention center in the Everglades. So what was it that President Trump said? Oh, yeah, you are my friend and you'll always be my friend, and we may have had some skirmishes, even in the future may have some. I doubt it, but I'll always come back because we have blood that seems to match pretty well. Well, first things first, Matt, this is a lot different than it was during the primaries when things got pretty contentious between those two. Fast forward to some of the problems now and the history behind them. Laura Trump, the president's daughter-in-law, decided not to run for Senate in North Carolina. So Michael Whatley then said, I'll run instead with Trump's backing. In case you didn't know, Whatley is the current Republican National Committee chair. So let's get into the heart of things here. There's an appearance on the Gulf Coast, and DeSantis turns his smoke on a fellow member of the GOP, accusing him of betraying party voters. Following me here? Not long after firing those shots, President Trump endorses Joe Gruters to become the next chair of the RNC. All right, this is getting convoluted. So wouldn't you know that is the veteran lawmaker DeSantis picked a fight with. Should DeSantis tread a bit more lightly here when he's playing with these big wigs in the GOP?
The DeSantis question is fascinating. I mean, what is he going to do next? Because clearly he's not the favorite of the White House. In 2028, it's not a definite, but it really looks strong for J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, some type of ticket. And that would be a strong ticket.
But that's not going to stop DeSantis.
Well, I think it might. I mean, J.D. Vance is polling in the, 40s and 50s now, at least in terms of the number one choice to be come after Trump. So the main question is Casey DeSantis going to run? And I know you're about to get to that. But to me, that is going to reflect a lot on what the governor wants to do as well, because his term is up in 2026. Apparently, he didn't want the Senate seat or to run for the Senate seat in Florida because I don't think he really enjoys being in the legislature. I think he wants to be an executive. So what do you do if the 2028 presidential nomination is blocked, so to speak, which it is now? Things can change dramatically, of course. What is he going to do? I think if Casey DeSantis became governor, that gives him another outlet to remain somewhat close to power, and well, not somewhat. His wife would be governor, but so. But if she doesn't decide to run, what happens to Governor DeSantis? What's his next move?
So, maybe does he run for the White House, not content to be first husband, but maybe with an eye on a cabinet position?
Sure, he could, and clearly, he would be up for a cabinet position probably because President Trump and I think Governor DeSantis both I'm not sure they love each other, but they both recognize that they need each other sometimes.
I was going to say, what they say publicly and what goes on behind closed doors.
That they need each other sometimes, and so they're going to keep I think a cordial relationship, or at least try to do that, and DeSantis has really supported President Trump's immigration agenda, much to the chagrin of a lot of people here in Florida with the Alligator Alcatraz idea and concept. So a cabinet position makes sense.
Yeah, and there's no love lost between Ron and Susie Wiles either.
No, there's not.
Although
she came out and said, I've moved beyond that, and DeSantis is an important governor in Florida. So let's.
Susie's the ultimate politician, more so than either Ron or Donald.
Probably, yeah.
So then Matt, DeSantis throws salt in the wound that we've been talking about. Trump endorses Gruters. DeSantis brushes it off, saying, if George Washington rose from the dead and came back and tapped me on the shoulder and said, will you appoint Joe Gruters CFO? My response would be, no, I can't do that without betraying the voters that elected me to lead this state in a conservative direction. So now you have two powerful people in the Republican Party who don't have Ron DeSantis on their party invite list. Who's going to be the president's better friend here come election time? I mean, you think Ron would learn to be a politician. I was at their wedding, Ron and Casey's wedding.
Okay.
He's not the friendliest guy in the world. I mean, even people are in his gubernatorial circle who work on his staff say when he's on the plane, he just sits by himself and he's not approachable.
Okay. Well, I didn't go to the wedding, so I don't know all the background that you have. But when you look at the way the governor has dealt with the state legislature and other state officials, over the last year or so, it's been fascinating because, I've studied Florida governors. I wrote a book on Jeb Bush.
Great read, by the way.
Thanks. DeSantis was probably the most powerful governor in Florida history during his first term. Mm-hmm. They gave him everything. The legislature didn't challenge him on anything, and they worked with him. And
then they did a 180.
And then, and now the last legislative session, he's at war with the House Speaker. So that was a huge change and a huge dynamic in Florida politics. And so, it's going to be very difficult for him to run for president in 2028 if he's divided Florida politically in terms of the Republican Party. So that, again, I think Casey DeSantis can kind of soothe some of those wounds if she decides to run.
Yeah, so how does all of this impact Casey? And I asked that. There was a recent poll.
Yeah, the UNF poll, yeah.
Yeah, done by UNF. So you've got a couple of dynamics here. Ron came out very popular in that poll. It was of Republicans, by the way. And I think he had something like 83% support. Casey, she had been very popular. The popularity slipped a little bit. You got to keep in mind that the other person who would probably be running against her is Byron Donalds, who has Donald Trump's support.
Endorsement, yep.
Knowing that, a majority of Republicans would probably go with Byron Donalds, knowing that he has Trump's support. There's a Hope Florida scandal, which might come back to bite Casey DeSantis. You got Ron, who's not very popular in Republican circles. How does that impact Casey in a run for governor?
Yeah, all that impacts, and what the UNF poll showed, which I found so interesting, is, if kind of the most dedicated Republican voters, if they're the ones that you're polling, Donalds is going to win easily.
Yeah.
But if you expand that, if you have a bigger turnout for your governor's race, then Casey DeSantis is very competitive and may be in the lead. And so the question is, what does turnout look like for our governor's race? And it's a primary. It'll be a primary, so it'll be in August. Wonderful weather here in Florida for voting. And so the question is, does Casey DeSantis make that decision? If she does, I hope she does, because it will be a fascinating race. If not, I think Donalds wins it easily over anybody else. So but to me, if the governor wants to stay relevant politically, Casey DeSantis needs to run. But it's interesting they haven't made the decision. It's usually by this time, even though we're still a year and 3 months away, basically a year from the primary now, because it's going to be in August. Somebody would make a decision by now, but they haven't made a decision.
What do you think she's waiting for?
I think she doesn't want to draw fire too early, and if she decides to run, she may not run. I don't know. But if she does, why spend up to a year of trying to deflect attacks? Maybe wait till the end of the year and go from there. The key question to me for the future of both Casey and the governor is money. can they raise the money that they used to when he was really seen as the leading Republican presidential candidate? Are their supporters going to be there for the money for a governor's race? Because Donald has raised good money so far, and so the DeSantis family is going to have to counter that.
Right. I mean, he's out there. He does 4 or 5 news conferences, every week. He is playing on this immigration issue, as you've pointed out. That's not by chance.
No. And clearly he's got something planned. I'm just not sure what it is. But, as a political scientist, I really hope Casey DeSantis runs, because that DeSantis versus Donalds, that's a great race. And if she doesn't run, I think Donalds is the overwhelming Republican favorite.
Right. And how do you see this redistricting issue playing out here in Florida? Are they going to wait on Texas, or are they just going to forge
I think
ahead?
they'll wait on Texas, but, it's already pretty heavily weighted toward Republicans. The Supreme Court decision, when you're drawing these districts, and I don't want to get into too much of it, but, there's certain criteria courts have laid out. One, the district has to be geographically connected. You can't have a district in Jacksonville, stop, and then it picks up again in Miami. It's got to be geographically connected. And then it has to have basically equal population to other districts. So you can't have one district with 10,000 and another district with 50,000 voters. It has to basically have the same population. And then 3, it has to have this a really difficult to define concept known as compactness, which is basically that the district makes some sense, either geographically or has a city in it, doesn't split up a city. It's not going to look like a snake running down the state. And so the question was it legal and was it constitutional to have partisan districting? In other words, to adopt those 3 principles, but at the same time have very heavily Republican districts and very heavily Democratic districts. Supreme Court said it was.
How about
partisan was okay.
How about demographic makeup? Because we saw what happened a couple of years ago when the black voters felt very disenfranchised when they carved up the panhandle.
Yep. Yeah, this is why it's in the courts, because we have a fair districts amendment specifically for Florida that says that you can't split up demographic groups, or you shouldn't split up demographic groups. But the fair districts amendment in some ways runs into what the 2019 Supreme Court decision is about. And so I imagine that's going to end up in court again if the governor and legislature decide to redraw the districts.
And, let me ask you something that I've asked of some other political scientists that have been on this show before. When you talk about the results in the last presidential election, it wasn't decided by those who voted. It was decided by those who chose not to vote. And if you look at some recent polls, you have a lot of people, Democrats and Republicans alike, who have changed their registration to independent because they don't like what either party is doing.
Right.
Come the midterms, come 2028, do you find that a lot of those who have been disenfranchised will show up this go-round, or do you find the same scenario playing out?
Well, you can't beat somebody with nobody, okay? And the Democrats really have not provided much of a platform in terms of, what Trump has been doing. And, I would argue, our mayor, Donna Deegan, has given stronger arguments for Democratic positions than the national politicians have. You just don't really hear very good arguments.
And they haven't found that message yet.
And they haven't found that message.
Donald Trump has given them every opportunity.
Sure. I mean, you've got economic data that's all over the place. Some people are doing really well. There's a lot of people who aren't. You really should be able to jump on that. This bill that passed, the big beautiful bill, has Medicaid reductions. You should be able to run on that, I think.
People aren't feeling the pain yet.
Yeah, they're not feeling the pain yet. And so, but the Democrats really have got to find a message, because Donald Trump's political machine is really geared up. I mean, his supporters love him. He can raise more money than can ever be raised, than has ever been raised before. So they're going to be geared up, and he's not. For people who say he's not an intelligent person, I think he is. He knows that if he wins if the Republicans win the midterm elections, he can do basically anything he wants the last 2 years.
Yeah, you've also got the, whatever potentially, we don't know, maybe in the Epstein bill, but he's effectively playing that Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope, and he's, got everybody off guard. So
yeah, I mean, I think the Epstein bill's kind of gone off, or Epstein bill, but Epstein issue's kind of gone off the radar now because he's, I think it was I think we talked, we exchanged some emails.
Like a pinball machine.
Yeah, that one Friday, was it last Friday or the Friday before? He moved nuclear subs, to confront Russia, and he did 2 other things. I mean, there's always something going on.
He's got the Putin meeting.
He's got the Putin meeting, and so there's always something going on, I think, and so it's going to be very difficult to pin him down politically, and the Democrats have to raise their game, and I think fighting back on this redistricting. As a political scientist, it's not my favorite thing to see that we're, if one side's going to manipulate, the other side's going to manipulate. That's not the greatest thing in the world for our democracy, but it does show some fight that the Democrats really haven't shown yet.
And if I were a betting person, there's something else that comes up next Monday.
If I were a betting person, there'd be something that comes up in about a half hour. I mean, this guy just keeps going and going.
Matt, always a pleasure. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Bruce.
And thank you for watching Politics and Power.
See why every day more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.